So, good afternoon, everybody. So myself, Sweety, and I'm a faculty here at NID Ahmedabad for Furniture and Interior Design discipline. Uh, NID is an institute of national importance. It's an institute set up in 1961 with a vision of actually providing world-class design solutions for very unique design-related problems of the country. So coming down to our topic, I was asked to take you guys through you designing with wood. That's the course. So uh, basically, wood is, I think, it's one of the most old building materials known to humankind, and it's a very versatile material. You could make right from a thin sheet of paper to a bridge using this material. And since it's such an old uh, material and it's available all across the globe, so I think there is a lot of traditional knowledge that uh, working with wood uh, builds upon. So per se, when we speak of innovation, I think woodworking is always rooted in vernacularity, and we heavily draw on the traditional wisdom that comes with this material. So I'll just take you through some basic terms that we use while designing with wood. Um, the idea of grain is basically, I'm sure you guys are aware of the composition of wood. So it's a hygroscopic material, and the cells are spread across the length of the trunk, and it's like a bunch of drinking straws through which all the nutrition flows across the trunk of the tree. And while the process of this growth, uh, this natural material actually builds a beautiful pattern which we call grain. And it's a very important aspect of designing with wood, that we understand what is the direction of the grain, which indicates the direction of growth of a wood trunk. And it is something that decides where do you cut it. I mean, what are the rules of working in terms of making cuts, making dents, carving. So all these aspects, these decisions are based on how the grain travels across a trunk. So grain also ultimately is a part of aesthetic as well. So when grains are interwoven and with all these irregularities of nature, so basically every tree trunk maintains some sort of a ledger for what all it has gone through. If the like the season cycle, there's a change, it would be captured in wood. If there is a drought, it would be captured in all the trees of the area. If there is excessive rainfall, that is also captured in the body. So all these variations not only have practical implication but also visual implications. So we call something, this is something called figure, which means it's a wood's capability to reflect light when you're viewing it from different angles. And uh, it is also a whole aesthetic in itself. Texture, again, coming to texture, is basically something that lets you decide what the final experience of holding, the tactile experience of holding this material, even if it's a piece, if it's a chair where the armrests are exposed, or smaller products like wooden spoons or accessories. So the texture actually also plays a very big role on deciding which wood to use for what category of product. Color, again, a very big aspect. The darker the wood color, it's considered to be the stronger variety of wood. And then it basically, if you can see the whole spectrum below, like the on the top, you can see it's a section of an ebony wood, which is found most common in Africa, and it's one of the darkest wood that is uh, found. And then there's this whole spectrum that you can see at the bottom. There's birch, cherry, mahogany, apple, maple, oak, walnut. So basically, wood, it is a self-sufficient material when it comes to designing. It brings in all colors with it. So there are a lot of practices that use just building with wood and the entire color palette that comes with using of different varieties of wood. Looking at finishes, so since it's a natural material and it's also a breathable material, so basically whatever you put on wood ends up rendering a different amount of different kind of color to it. So here are some samples which different kinds of finishes render to the wood. So and also one very big part of aesthetic decision when we're working with wood is that wood is a very unpredictable material. There is no template. If you look at one piece from even a mass production environment, each and every piece can retain a unique quality. So I think that really works in favor of the mass customization demands that we are looking at all across globe. So people are looking for unique products. So in that, when you look at it, look at wood from that perspective, it's an infinite customization opportunity in itself. It's all inbuilt into it. For example, a product like this. So basically, this is a product that I had developed. I was working for some time in Jaipur, and Bagru is known for its natural indigo printing. And there are like 30, 40-year-old indigo wells that are sort of placed in the small village of Bagru, which is next to Jaipur. So even finishes like these are in place. So this is basically mango wood coasters dipped in indigo. And so basically, when we talk of finishes in wood, it need not hide anything. Like unlike in case of MDF or plywood, sometimes we want to paint the surfaces or hide it with hide the internal constituency through putting on laminates. But in case of wood, it's always a partial relationship with finishes. We finish it so that it could sustain the damages. We finish it so that it could enhance the grains. So just like our skin, when it's dry, it's something else. When you put a coat of oil onto it, it renders itself. So that's the idea of finishes with wood. I'm sure you are aware of the conversion processes, but I just want to quickly take you through it. So conversion is basically converting itself self-implicant, converting a log of wood into usable thicknesses, something that a lot of industries in wood sector heavily derive upon. That what is the conversion trends in the market at the moment, and because this really decides upon the sizes that we get to work with. So this is a plain simple conversion technique. Basically, if you cut a log parallelly all across its diameter, we get something called live sawn, which means it gets a complete range of the wood's grain. But this live sawing technique has a little problem in it, which is basically all the grades of wood that is harvested from a live sawing will not be of the same strength, because as you know, the heart and the sap, the exterior part of along the periphery of the wood, it's not so strong, and the center part is the strongest part. So live sawing actually results into a variable amounts of uh, timber. Some of it could be used for strong applications where strong structural integrity is required, whereas others can't be. So in that sense, there is no wastage in live sawing, but it really gives you a I mean, you have to put different parts of the yield to different kinds of utilities. So it increases logistics on the post conversion stage. So as a result, there's another technique called plain sawing is also particularly used, where you can see the central part is harvested separately, and it's basically the soft and the hard part are not on the same chip, which means you could actually delegate different parts of wood to different kinds of manufacturers, and application based segregation becomes very easy. Also, it definitely minimizes scrap, because if you see in the previous slide, when the live sawing was happening, it was all on one piece, so you need to basically separately divide different parts for different kinds of utilities, whereas here the sawing itself, post sawing, the segregation is readily available. Next. Another stage is rift sawing, which actually results into a very uniform grain. If you and uh, if you are looking at utilities of wood, let's say you want to create a living quarter with pine wood skeleton, so then you want all the divisions in a space to have some sort of rhythm. Otherwise, it will become a cacophony of textures and colors across a space. So in that case, rift sawing actually helps, and it's a technique that is mostly applied to softer timber, which is used for frame making, not for smaller, harder, structurally challenging compositions, but you use it for simple A frames or rectangular frames or space frames, basically. And the last here, you can skip this slide actually. Thank you. And so coming on to the properties of wood that actually help us decide which piece to use for what part of the structure. So wood actually acts more stronger in tension rather than compression. Compression lets it puts in a lot of, since the wood grains and the cells are a porous entity. Basically, compression can result into collapse of the wood grains inward. So it's usually when if you're putting deciding on a structure, we always make these decisions based on where if we can maximize the tension in the wood instead of putting it under compression. So what is tension? Tension is basically tendency of both ends of a wood piece being pulled apart. That's, in simple words, that's tension. Compression is within the structures when the grain along the grain direction is uh, pushed towards each other. So as you can see, the arrows are also indicating. So if this is a tie member in a chair, for example, tie member is something basically which connects two verticals with a horizontal member to stabilize the structure. So you can see in a single member, on the top side there would be tension, but on the same member on the underside there will be compression. And the third force, which is one of the most notorious forces, is called the racking force, which is basically, since it's a every tree plank is a circular radial structure. So there is, since as I said at the beginning of the presentation, that it's a bunch of straws, and there is always this tendency of a radial tension to sort of pull it all apart. So that's the most notorious force, which is called the racking force. And racking is the farther you go from a place where the wood is joined, the more influential it gets. So that's why you must have seen that wood is always applied in smaller sections. There is a lot of multiple members are converging onto a junction. So that sort of a composition results out of the effects of the racking force. Next. So wood choices, if we are sort of deciding on any project that what wood to go for, one of the very important aspect is the price that exists in the market right now. Pricing and delivery of goods into an appropriate bracket is the biggest problem. So wood has an immense capability of repairability. So as opposed to MDF or plywood, where if something goes wrong, if the material that you receive from the factory is breached by any circumstance, you would have to replace the entire panel. Whereas for wood, even if there is a little fracture, there is a little rupture, it could always be filled with putty, adhesives, and it has an infinite repairability capacity. And I think if you so this capability of wood to be able to repair itself makes it one of the most sustainable materials in the industrial zone. I mean, despite of all things that you hear, and the manufacturer that I was working for in Jaipur, we worked in so many materials, but end of the day, I think wood fits the bill. And a lot of international brands like H&M Home, Zara, Target, Cole, Baker, all of them really, really vouch for wooden products from India. But when they are asking for wooden products, they are also asking for a FSC COC certification, which is I'm sure you must be aware of it, that it's an international agency that uh, basically looks at ethical sourcing of wood. So there are a lot of and all these Western buyers have deployed huge staff on the ground in the country, where they regularly conduct audits of the lumber yards where our timber was sourced, or the factory itself. So that ethical sourcing chain is something that all these international brands are very closely monitoring. Um, so apart from the pricing and the certification, there's always this question of what is the right wood from design perspective. So we look at it from the workability perspective. If you look at things like mango wood, it is a terrible wood because of the very refined grain. It actually damages a lot of machinery. So if you want to, let's say, route a carving pattern into mango wood, there's so much interwoven grain into it that you end up spending more on maintenance of your tools rather than gaining a profitable business out of it. So that's the problematic aspect of similarly acacia. I think it's a wonderful wood when it comes to you know thinking local and beautiful grain. But acacia, the longer sections you use, the more warping issues it faces. So if you, let's say you're doing a solid wood table with long legs and turned wood, I think acacia would bend. So the success rate is very low. Um, Another thing, very important aspect is the seasoning. So for basically seasoning, uh, uh, the readily basically when you cut a fresh tree, it is a living entity. So uh, it has a lot of nutritional fluids going through it, and when it's freshly cut and if it's not dried to a certain workable moisture content, then you won't be able to function optimally. Your machines might get stuck. So basically we're looking at a moisture range of not more than 14%, but not less than 18%. If it's more than 14%, then you would face issues like make a cut and then there's warping, there's cupping, all that sort of defects start happening. And then if you're basically creating a product where a wood part is fitting into a metal part or fitting into a ceramic part, in that case, you will never be able to precisely make these assembly work. And if it's of course less than 8%, then the wood might crumble itself, which means it's too dry and it might collapse under too much pressure. So these are some images of from our end, how do we start any furniture design project. So basically we would look at all the grains, the figure, the moisture content, and of course pick up the right sizes, and then map the possibilities of what all can we make with these. You can even see some burr. So design process is actually very inclusive in that sense. I mean, because we have this end-to-end research that we put into before producing any product. So and also creative problem solving to be able to use all bits and pieces of it. And of course it's not a template, so every single time there's a new decision making that happens. So next, so I would briefly so yeah, this is another example of joinery systems, how a lot of times in a lot of disciplines there is this thought, and of course with a lot of materials it's true, that if you want to render strength to a structure, you put a lot of material into that. If you, let's say you want to create a concrete dome, you put in like a lot of rebar, a lot of thick layer of concrete, and it'll work. Similarly with stone, you know, a monument like India Gate is a very good example of building with stone, where a lot of mass into the structure makes it strong and lets it take weight. But that's not the case with wood. Wood structures are not meant to be a stiff. They are not meant to be a lot of. If you want to make a strong chair out of wood, it doesn't mean you put in a lot of thick and heavy sections. That's not the way to go about it. A wood structure has to be breathable. A wood structure has to have a movement in itself. So this is a very old shaker style chair that was designed in 1920s, and I think this is also the beginning of arts and crafts movement. Uh, and as you can see, this is a strategy that is still relevant. I mean, today, how do you use smaller sections to create bigger structures? I think it's one of the most cost-effective strategies of designing with wood. So here, as you can see in this chair, how thin sections are multiple times connected with the tie member, or it's given support at multiple distances. So there is no member left unattended in this entire structure, apart from very small length towards the back. So I think it's a very good example of how you can use smaller bits and pieces to create a big and strong structure. So looking at the furniture market at the moment, it still continues to be majorly an unorganized sector. As you can see, the 80% of it is unorganized sector, which includes local vendors, which also includes small pack practices, which are boutique based. There are, of course, then there are players like IKEA, Home Center, uh, Fab India, Pepperfry. So these bigger brands are also sort of making a dent. Then online retail is actually picking up a lot in this segment. The reason being very big inventory of catalogs that you can browse through. So there's a lot of flexibility to the consumers in online market. And of course, the ease of logistics. I mean, buying furniture, it used to be a very rare event in our lives. Like initially, a couple of like last century, I think all the furniture used to, used to be bought with the mindset of sustaining for a very long time. Minimum 10 to 15 years is what was expected out of furniture. So this whole practice of actually looking at a catalog, asking the carpenter to customize things the way you want them, also arranging for perhaps a space if you're doing bigger pieces, or if the bigger pieces are made in some other part of the city, the expenses of transporting. So all those factors have been very nicely resolved by online market, where you can just on a click of your mouse, you can buy a furniture with good warranty, serviceability. Some companies even send carpenters at home to fit your furniture if you're working with fixed furniture. IKEA has a very amazing kitchen and customizing services, where they come and install custom solutions at your space. So it is slowly making a very big dent. And now the perception with furniture has also changed. People, since even the ma'am before me was speaking about the trends and how people want to upgrade and renovate their homes very quickly. So people are looking for very low maintenance, very contemporary looking, very high end looking boutique style furniture, and also things that are very quick to acquire as well as install.